All right. Good morning, folks, watching us on the live feed on our live stream on our YouTube page at 580 WIBW or on our Facebook page as well. And hopefully you will enjoy our program coming up here in just a bit. And we're going to get the latest on everything that is going on the developments concerning the highly pathogenic avian influenza. Dr. Justin Smith is already here with us, State Animal Health Commissioner for the state of Kansas, and with the Kansas Department of Agriculture. And Janet Bailey will soon be joining us, the CEO of Kansas Dairy. And so we're just in commercial on 580 WIBW, and we will be joining us soon, as a matter of fact, and we will get going with the program coming up here in just a bit. So hearing the commercials in my earphone, and hopefully we will be going here just shortly. All right. So stand by. Good morning, everyone. Glad to have you with us on the program this morning. And we are on our StreamYard feed as well. And we will be joined here in just a second by Dr. Justin Smith, who is the State Animal Health Commissioner with the Kansas Department of Agriculture, as well as Janet Bailey, the CEO of Kansas Dairy. And that will be coming up this morning on the Ag Issues program right here on 580 WIBW. But before we do that, let's get a check of the weather forecast. All right, we're here on our StreamYard feed, and let's say good morning to Janet Bailey. Janet, good morning.
Good morning.
All right. And we'll get into it here for those of you on the StreamYard feed. We're running the weather right now on 580 WIBW. And at this early in the morning, hearing two different audio sources in my head tends to confuse one person. That would be me. So hopefully it won't be too confusing. And we will be going here in just a second on an ever-changing topic of discussion of the highly pathogenic avian influenza that is taking place. And back at the studio, Nick, I need to hear the weather. Thank you. So we will get going here in just a second. And if you're hearing the weather or seeing the forecast, we do have several more chances for moisture across the state, and hopefully some beneficial moisture falling out into the western part of the state, specifically southwest Kansas. National Weather Service in Dodge City says they could get an inch and a half of moisture by 6 o'clock Saturday morning, which would be great news for an area that's been very, very dry. All right, stand by on the StreamYard feed. Thank you very much, meteorologist Dan Holliday, with an update on the forecast. Right now in the capital city, we have fog, quarter-mile visibility, 47 degrees, and clear sky, 50 degrees at Billard Airport. This morning on the Ag Issues program and also on our StreamYard feed, we are pleased to be joined this morning by Dr. Justin Smith, Kansas Animal Health Commissioner for the Kansas Department of Agriculture. And Dr. Smith, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you, Greg.
And also joining us this morning is Janet Bailey, who serves as the CEO of Kansas Dairy, with the combination of the Kansas Dairy Association and the Kansas Dairy Commission. Janet, good morning to you.
Morning, Greg. Morning, Dr. Smith.
Good morning.
All right, let's get to it. One of the first things, Dr. Smith, we want to talk about is from earlier in the week when it was announced that USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service, as well as APHIS, National Veterinary Services Laboratory, testing ground beef samples from the states that have been affected by highly pathogenic avian influenza. And that was good news on the results, but nonetheless, that was a different development or an updated development on what we've seen for HPAI that has been found in dairy cattle.
Correct. Yeah, it was something that I think as a food source, it was something inevitable that we were going to be doing some testing with it. But yeah, it was great news that it came out, and we were our inspection process, our food safety process is intact and working well. So we were happy to see that.
And Janet, I haven't had a chance to talk with you about several of these issues as well. What are you hearing from the dairy producers here in the state of Kansas after all this, in mid-April, when the announcement came out that HPAI was found in a couple of herds here in the state of Kansas?
Well, I think our response and the attention of the dairy industry in Kansas rolls back to March when we were hearing the first identification of a herd in Texas and the interest in Kansas dairy producers to ensure that they were standing up additional biosecurity protocols. Some of those producers have done exercises or participated in exercises. Others have participated in programs to develop biosecurity plans. So if there is a concern, even if it's something we really don't understand, they have the ability to protect their herds, protect employees. In times, they began doing things on their own farms to try to be a little bit more careful. We don't fully understand how HPAI or H5N1 influenza A spreads. And so, once they knew there was something going on, many of those producers began to do some additional things out of an abundance of caution with their dairy farms across the state. And so really since that time, my leadership and those dairy farmers across the state have been trying to adapt to the situation and just make sure that they're doing the additional things necessary to keep their herds, their employees, and the food supply, the dairy supply, as safe as they can, especially as we learn more. And in a time when, we're still grateful that it is milk from cows that are not symptomatic that enter the food supply, and that milk is pasteurized, that milk that our customers see in the grocery store shelves, that milk that young people are consuming in the school lunch program, that milk is pasteurized. And knowing that pasteurization is killing the virus, we've had assurances of that. It continues to reinforce that our dairy farmers have confidence in what is going into the food supply, and that those biosecurity protocols, are their best defense right now to try to protect their herds.
Dr. Smith, a couple of things about the testing of the ground beef. Now, if you're just a regular consumer, and we want to highly emphasize that the HPAI influenza A has been only detected in dairy cattle and not beef cattle. That should be the first thing we say. But hearing that, it gives the perception of, well, what is going on here concerning why they're doing this type of testing. And then the other part of that is hearing, well, on the test that we have done, we have found H5N1 particles, in the dairy milk that has been tested previous to before that. Can you clarify or clear up, the perception and what exactly are H5N1 particles?
Sure. So, yeah, one of the things that, obviously we would have liked to have found that there was no virus there at all. But at the same time, our expectations were, just because this is an agricultural event, that there was some opportunity to have virus within that milk product. With that being said, as Janet reiterated, the pasteurization process has been a longstanding program that has worked very effectively to inactivate these processes or inactivate these viruses and this bacteria that we can find in milk occasionally. And so the process of heat treating that milk does exactly that. It inactivates that virus. It breaks it down. It breaks it down into particles. It breaks it down into, genetic material. And, fortunate or unfortunate, our testing protocols, they are so sensitive anymore that they can pick up these small, minute particles that might happen to be there that have been totally inactivated through this pasteurization process. Our testing protocols are fantastic in the fact that they help us find these things, but we have to recognize what they're finding those little specks of dust and those little specks of dirt that we might not found as far as in a normal cleaning process. So it's just that, it's particles. It's not virus at all.
Janet, this may be a very simple question, but they talk about pasteurization process and the fact that it would kill the virus. But let's break it down even further. Talk about pasteurization and why it is done in the milk supply.
Some people get really interested in the history of food, right? I mean, some of us actually really enjoy those programs on TV. And I think that there are a lot of people who forget why we pasteurize. In the dairy industry, it wasn't the dairy industry that invented the glass bottle and a standardized sanitary way to convey milk to customers. It was a physician, because that physician recognized we needed a more sanitary way, because people were getting sick because folks were taking any pail or any item possible to get their milk and take it, home even if they did have their own cow, but certainly if they didn't have their own cow, right? So this goes back a long time in American history. So in the 1800s, that sanitary glass bottle invented by a physician was really for public health. And so our next step then was pasteurization, and pasteurization heat treats that milk. And there are a couple different ways now that we see pasteurization. And, there are a lot of consumers now that enjoy high temperature pasteurized milk products because they are shelf stable and they have a long shelf life. Both sometimes don't require refrigeration, but also we have high temp pasteurized products that can have a long shelf life in your refrigerator. Folks enjoy some of those products that they pick up at the grocery store today, maybe in the refrigerator case. But if you look at the date, you've got a long shelf life on that milk. It lasts longer for our consumer. And, some folks joke and say, why would the dairy industry want, something that lasts longer? Don't you want something that people have to consume quickly or get more of? And ultimately, we want people to have a product that they can enjoy, that meets their needs. And that's what pasteurization does for us, both the high temp and then even a lower temp that still kills virus, but allows us to have a safe product for consumers.
Dr. Smith, before we go to break, one of the things that I also saw this week, it depends on how you look at this. There was an article out that more than half of cats on farm where bird flu infected cows died after drinking milk. But you read into the article and those cats were given raw milk. And obviously the difference between raw milk and pasteurized as well. So there are different aspects of this, different things that we keep starting to see that develop. And of course, that's all through the testing that is taking place too.
Very much so, and you're exactly right. I mean, there was some cat fatalities on some of these dairies, and to your point, it was discovered that they were actually fed the raw milk. So yeah, and there's still some questions out there. Did they have access to wild birds or cadavers or something of that sort? So, but yeah, the raw milk was looked at, and obviously we know that this milk has an opportunity. I don't know if it was discarded milk that they were feeding to those cats, as far as, out of this hospital pen, or where that milk was actually generated from. I have to believe that's where it came from, was those cattle that were showing clinical signs and were taken offline, and then that milk they were used and they were feeding it to those cats. And so, unfortunate, very unfortunate. So, we have learned in that. So again, I think it comes back to the fact of the pasteurization process is important in this in the milk production process. And so we need to rely on that. And that there is some innate dangers in consuming raw milk. And so, something that needs to be considered when that choice is made.
All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk more with Dr. Justin Smith, State Animal Health Commissioner with the Kansas Department of Agriculture, as well as Janet Bailey, the CEO of Kansas Dairy, who joins us this morning on the Ag Issues program right here on 580 WIBW. All right, for those of you on our StreamYard feed, we are in a commercial break on 580 WIBW, and we'll talk more on the rest of the program coming up here in just a bit. You can have two better experts to talk about this issue of HPAI found in dairy cattle. Dr. Smith, who we've had on a couple of times, to talk about that, and of course Janet Bailey as well with Kansas Dairy, talking about the latest developments, ever-changing developments that have been occurring. Once again, want to highly emphasize that as the testing of the ground beef has occurred, not finding any parts of our HPAI in the testing of the ground beef that Avis and everyone in DC had, and also pasteurization process in milk. The milk supply is safe. The beef supply is safe. And we'll talk more about that here in the second part of the Ag Issues program. And you also, if you need to cough, you need to turn down your mic, as I just did. So it's amazing the little things that occur. Don't sneeze, and if you need to cough,
there's no doubt you're human.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's nothing better than me coughing and Dr. Smith and Janet going, okay.
Seeing all of the cotton in the air this week, and everything growing and budding. There's a lot of that.
All right, we're back on the Ag Issues program this morning here on 580 WIBW. Janet Bailey, CEO of Kansas Dairy, is joining us, as well as Dr. Justin Smith, State Animal Health Commissioner with the Kansas Department of Agriculture, is joining us on the program this morning. Janet, I'm going to start with you to start this second segment. You talked about what your producers have been doing and some of the things that they've always been doing, looking at their biosecurity measures as well. I don't know if you would call it the level of worry, but the concern that is out there because of the fact that some of these states have detected HPAI, but it came from Texas herds that cattle moved over to, when they received cattle from those Texas dairy herds. And that's something as well that we'll get with Dr. Smith in just a bit. But transporting dairy cattle, if they're needing to move from Kansas to another state, or Texas, and in this case, some other states as well, that's another part of this too that they need to keep close tabs on.
Greg, the science is still needing to kind of be unraveled in all of this. We don't know how this virus passes and what the cow-to-cow transfer looks like. And so that's something that continues to be answered. And so in this time, we've got some movement orders that dictate how cattle can be moved. There are some special veterinary a CVI, so a veterinary inspection has to occur for lactating cows for them to move. And so we've got some folks who are trying to sell cows who have to have additional inspections on those cows, within the state. If they have to cross the border, then USDA has put an order in that does require that a sample, if it's a group larger than 30 cows, or those 30 cows have to be tested. And there's no chute side test for this, and is testing in the milk. So those farmers right now have to do a lot more to move those cows. And that means time is of the essence, because they have to get those tests back within a certain time. Those milk samples have to be sent off. And so that's one issue. If you're trying to move cows for whatever reason, even if they're going to slaughter, and we think about cull cows or cows that are no longer going to be milked, we generally don't process those in Kansas. So those generally are going across state lines. And so that's created a lot of question in terms of the market for those cows. And so our dairy farmers are working through that right now. If they can direct ship to market, they're trying to work through that right now. But if they've generally gone through an auction barn, they're working with their auction barn to try to ensure that they will take those cows, and those cows still have a market. The bright spot in the dairy industry has been, that market, the beef market. It's been really strong, as folks who listen to your program know. And so that salvage market for those cows who are no longer going to have a productive life in a dairy herd, that's been a bright spot in terms of income when those cows no longer have a life in a dairy herd. And so that's been kind of a double whammy right now, in that dairy farmers are trying to figure out what that looks like. And we've had some people delay sale of some of those cows, or struggle a little bit to be sure that their existing market will take those cows, in the last couple weeks. Again, it wasn't the intent of the order, but it's another issue that they are working through, and it does add to some stress. Dairy farmers are trying to do the right thing. They're trying to make sure they've got what they need to go into the market, but it just adds another layer of question.
And Dr. Smith, I want to follow that up with the fact that Kansas Department of Agriculture put into place what you needed to do as well. Has that been working effectively?
It has, Greg. And I think when you say effectively, I think what it's done is it's provided some oversight in the fact that it puts another person out there to look at those cattle. It does require, so our order here in Kansas requires that any of those animals that are moving within the state or into the state must have a veterinary CVI, or certificate of veterinary inspection. So it does allow that. It allows those folks to take a second look at those cows, make sure that they have, and yeah, we're seeing that. Fortunately, we haven't seen new spread here in the state of Kansas after the initial outbreak of it that we found, those 4 herds. And so, yeah, I'm hoping that the mitigations, but I think more than not, it's probably just the awareness that the dairyman has taken on, the biosecurity processes that they've instilled, the enhanced biosecurity processes, and just that awareness, I think, has probably been as effective as anything. But yes, we hope that our mitigation steps and our those extra hurdles that we've had to incur are being effective in helping us monitor this disease.
Dr. Smith, too, and Janet had mentioned earlier, this is a new situation in the fact that HPAI, highly pathogenic avian influenza, found in poultry has now moved to a different species, in this case, dairy cattle as well. So this roadmap is being written, so to speak, and the research is new as well.
Very much so, and that's exactly where we're at. I mean, I've made the comment on this program before, is the fact that this was a novel and kind of a new aspect of this. That's something that, frankly, we weren't expecting at that point in time. We had seen it move into mammals, but it had been strictly into mammals that were predatory or scavengers. They were what we call dead-end host, and so this process of into our livestock is a new take on this thing. And so something that we've had to navigate. And yes, the research now is just getting ramped up to really try to understand what's happening in these cows.
And it's one too, Janet, that it can't, I don't think, be overemphasized enough that humans are safe. Again, beef supply is safe and the milk supply is safe too.
Greg, I appreciate that. Our dairy farms are taking some extra precautions to keep employees safe. From what we understand, there was a worker who, has been identified who had been sick at a dairy farm. There is some understanding now, as more research and traceback is done, that that may or may not have come from the dairy. So again, that's why as we go on, more information is helpful. But there's still an understanding that sometimes when we have a novel virus like this, we've got to ask the right questions. And, it's the hope of our dairy farmers that these measures right now are temporary. We will understand more. And then as we understand more, knowing that our food supply is safe, that the dairy products that people enjoy are safe, the beef supply is safe, that we are able to, look at this in its entirety. And, I always hesitate to say go back to normal, but that we're able to recognize this as a temporary protocol that we're under in how they're managing their operations. And then some of these restrictions then will be able to be eased and lifted.
And Dr. Smith, I'm going to end with you. And Janet brought up a great point. When we go back to normal, but that is a question. With this being a novel virus, it's really hard to determine right now when normal will come back.
Yeah, it is. Unfortunately, Greg, it is one of those things that we're trying to understand, how long is this virus in these cows? Do they have the opportunity to get reinfected? What is did they seroconvert, or did they build protection antibodies to the virus? And if so, how long standing are those? Excuse me. So we are at that point now of that discovery. And so, yeah, every one of these measures that we put in place and all this processes we put, I hope someday that we can redact those and be done with those. But I think the research that we're doing now and that we're getting ramped up will tell us a lot, and we'll get through this. But it is, we hope that we get back to quote unquote normal very soon.
All right. Well, Dr. Justin Smith, State Animal Health Commissioner with the Kansas Department of Agriculture, appreciate you joining us this morning.
Thank you very much. Greatly appreciate the opportunity and always happy to visit.
And Janet Bailey, CEO of Kansas Dairy, always good to talk with you as well. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Likewise. Appreciate it, Greg.
This has been Ag Issues here on 580 WIBW. And stay with us when we come back. We'll get an update on the news headlines, and we'll check the weather forecast that comes up next.